We're at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Andy Whitaker, a member of our Rustici software sales team. Today, we're going to be walking through our content controller application and highlighting my own personal best of features list. But before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. I'll be taking questions at the end, so please add them in the chat and questions box. We have our marketing and a few members of our content controller product team here with us this morning as well to lend a hand. Also, GoToMeeting is getting a little bit fancy on us. There are some reaction buttons now in the app. So if the spirit moves you, please let me know how I'm doing along the way. But spoiler alert, I'm expecting nothing but thumbs up and heart emojis. All right, so let's dive in with that out of the way. A little bit about us for those that are new to Rustici software. We've been in business for over 20 years. We're located in the Middle Tennessee area, kind of around Nashville, if you're familiar with Music City. We're primarily here to help e-learning content play nicely with learning systems. So we have lots of customers who are learning management system providers. We help them support e-learning standards like SCORM and XAPI. We also work with a bunch of content providers. And the product that we'll be looking at today and kind of walking through, looking at features and best ofs, is going to be our content controller application, which is really the primary solution that we offer for helping our content provider customers share their content with third-party learning management systems. Everything we do here at Rustici is centered around e-learning standards. We're experts when it comes to SCORM, XAPI, CMI5, AICC. We're a good place to come to get those types of questions answered if you just have standards type questions. But obviously we have software, it's in the name, where we're helping customers achieve various things using e-learning standards in particular ways. Okay, so today is all about content controller. And as I mentioned before, my personal best of list. This also happens to be a list of features that our customers and folks out in the world that are looking for a content distribution solution tend to get the most excited about. I'll kind of run you through this list here, and then we're going to spend most of our time this morning getting into the application itself, having me walk you through different features of the application and calling out these specific features along the way. So the first one is going to be sharing content in different standards. The next feature, number 2, that we get excited about is the versioning capabilities of the application. Number 3 is multiple language support for customers that offer content that is written or spoken in a variety of languages. Managing licenses is a big part of the application, so we'll dive in a bit more there. And then reports, collecting data, providing our customers with reporting, but also talking about sharing some of that data with third-party systems that you're sharing your content with. All right, so over into the application itself. For those unfamiliar with Content Controller, this is the application. This is the solution that we have up and running for over 200 customers around the world these days, helping them to host, manage, and distribute their content to third-party learning systems. That could be a learning management system, an LXP. We don't really care what the third-party system is called. We just care that it supports a variety of different e-learning standards. Starting off, we'll jump into the content tab. We call this your content master library. This is where our customers are going to come to add their content to the application. It's also the place where they will manage their content that is being hosted within the tool. Starting with our first best of feature is sharing content in different standards. That's going to start with the standards that the system supports from a hosting perspective and a playing perspective. And you can see those standards listed here inside of the parentheses. When we say SCORM at Rustici Software, we always mean every version of SCORM. So that could be SCORM 1.2, SCORM 2004, second, third, and fourth edition. We even go back and support SCORM 1.1. If you're using SCORM 1.1 content, God bless you, but it's supported within most of our tools. In addition to the standards-based content that we support within the application, there's a variety of media file types that we also support. You can see here that we have support for PDFs, we have support for MP3s, and we have support for MP4 files. So for customers that have this type of content that they want to host and share with third-party systems, they're free to bring that type of content directly into our application, Content Controller, and we will automatically track the usage of PDFs, MP3s, and MP4s using the Experience API under the hood. So once you have your content imported into Content Controller, it's going to show up in our master content library under the Courses tab. From here, there's some tools for organizing that content. You can create folders, organize the content around certain topics or subject matters, whatever makes sense for you. We're going to stay in the content section because I want to go ahead and talk about the second best of feature, which is the versioning capabilities of the tool. After you've imported a course, let's say first created a course using the authoring tool of your choice, you've exported that course out and have imported it into Content Controller. At some point in the future, you might identify a typo. You might see a section that needs to be enhanced or changed in some way. So you're going to need to version content over time, even after you've shared that content out to third-party systems. Content Controller makes this super easy. And candidly, this is one of the things that most of our customers get most excited about, especially those customers who have historically passed their content out in its entirety to their different customers. If you can imagine a world where you have a library of 10 courses and you've actually handed over the SCORM files for those individual courses to 10 different customers, the overhead and the challenges when it comes to updating that content becomes quite cumbersome, actually. You're going to have to share new files with customers, replace those files on the LMS, be relying on their learning management system administrator to be able to swap those files out appropriately. It's different with Content Controller. All you do is go to your authoring tool. Again, we support content that conforms to standards, so we're agnostic to the tool that you use to create that content. You'll create a new version for that course. You'll log into Content Controller, find that course in your content master library, click the version button, and here's where you're going to upload the new, in this case, SCORM 2004 third edition version of that course. We even add an open text field here so you can add what has changed between the versions over time. It's kind of a nice record for your team to have to see how this version or how this course particularly has changed as you've updated it over time. Once you add the new version of the course to Content Controller, you're going to find it listed here under the versions header for that course. The green check mark is going to signify which is the primary version of the course currently. You will then see a new version of the course listed, the version that you've just uploaded to the course. When you're ready to make this new version the primary version of the course, you're going to select this button and then select Publish. At this point, we're going to ask you what you would like us to do with the learners that are currently in progress with the prior version. If you select Maintain Progress, we will keep those learners on that prior version, while any new learner will get the updated version of the course. If you select Restart, we'll have everyone start over from the beginning of the course the next time they launch the course. The biggest, or the reason that this is on our best of list, or my personal best of list, comes down to really the need to, or the lack of need to redistribute files to customers that already have access to that content through their learning management system. As soon as you make this the primary version, select Maintain Progress or Restart, learners within those third-party applications that already have access to that course will automatically get routed to the appropriate version based on the selection that you make here, again, without having to redistribute anything to your customers. It can be a huge time saver for our customers. Okay, so again, remaining in the content section, let's talk about multiple languages. In our application Content Controller, we use the term equivalence to signify this particular feature of the application. When we say equivalence, what we really mean is this is a piece of content that our customer has offered in a variety of different languages. There might be an English language version, a Spanish language version. In order to utilize equivalence within Content Controller, you would first need to import, in this case, let's call it a SCORM package for the English version, a SCORM package for the Spanish version, a SCORM package for the French version. You would do that in the master content library. Once those packages have been imported into the tool, then you can come over into the equivalence section and build your equivalent. I'm going to show you an example here of one that's already been built. This particular All About Golf course is an equivalent that has a variety of different language options. Each of these, again, were imported into the content tab, and then through the application, there's an easy process for putting those together into a single equivalent. When it comes time to then share this particular course with a customer's third-party LMS, you're only going to have to share it once with them. And when they access it or launch it from the third-party system, I'll show you what this looks like. I'll click test. In this particular case, the learner's logged into the LMS and they've launched into this course that's offered in multiple languages through that third-party system. When they launch the course, keep in mind that Content Controller and this navigation will not be presented to the user, but they will see this language, which will be localized to whatever language their browser is set to by default. And if that default language is one of the equivalent languages that the course is provided in, that language will be auto-selected from the drop-down menu. Then as a learner, I have the option to actually select the language version that I want to take the course in. Keep in mind, these are all the same course. The only difference is the language that they're either written or spoken in. So I might select Spanish. And when I hit continue, I'm going to enter into the Spanish version of that course. It keeps our customer from having to distribute, in this case, 5 different course packages. They share one course package, and we'll talk about course packages that are shared here in just a bit. And then the customer only has one file that they have to import into their LMS. So it makes life easy for our customer. And more importantly, it makes life easy for their customers. And then it puts control of the language into the learner's hands. Okay, so sharing in different standards, we're going to touch a little bit more on that as we get into the account section. We've touched on versioning. We've touched on multiple language support. Now is the time to jump over into the accounts section of Content Controller. These are going to be a list of organizations that our customer needs or wants to share their content with through some third-party system that that organization is using. So typically for us, this is a list of our customers' customers. When I'm ready to share my content with a new customer, let's say, as a Content Controller administrator, I'm going to come to the Accounts tab. I'm going to click the Add button, and I'm going to go through a simple process of naming that customer, naming the account, and then also telling Content Controller how we as a content provider have licensed our content to that particular organization. So again, that'll show up here. We've got Acme Inc. as the name. And then in this particular case, I'm licensing my content to Acme Inc. based on a population of learners. So I can have up to 100. In this case, I'm allowing some overages. So you can see here that I've actually supported 110 learners. I don't have an expiration date, but I'm going to go ahead and make one. I'm going to add a limit here that says add expiration date. We're going to give you a little bit of messaging here before I do that. And then now I'm going to set my expiration date to some date in the future. Doesn't really matter for sake of demonstration. And when I hit save, now I've added an expiration date to this particular license. So what this means is that any piece of content that I share or our organization shares with Acme Inc. will be available to their learners through their learning system up until this particular date, and then available to up to 100 learners through that system. And in this case, there's a little bit of flexibility in the license where we're allowing overages to occur. From a licensing perspective, that can be kind of hard and fast. You can set limits that are expiration date specific. All access gets turned off on that date. Even on the learner limit side of things, if you wanted to just keep it to 100 unique learners being able to access content through Acme's third-party system, you can have it be a hard cutoff at 100. Or, because a lot of our customers have asked for it over time, you can have these be a bit more flexible. You can allow for overages with respect to the license and the access control. Okay, so once I've created my account, then the next thing I'm going to do is jump into the content section of the account. When I first create an account within Content Controller, this tab, this content tab, is going to be empty. I need to tell Content Controller what pieces of content I need to share with this account. And that's where this add button comes in. You select add. If you've got content organized just as individual courses within the content master library, you can select add content. It will show you the list of courses that you have as well as any equivalents that you've created. And then you can make those individual selections through this user interface. If you've gone ahead and organized folders within the content master library, you might decide to copy entire folders over into their account. So depending on how you've organized things in the library side of things, that's how you'll know which selection to make when adding content to their content tab. Once you've made those selections, they're going to show up again under the content tab. These are the pieces of content that you're interested in sharing with Acme Inc.'s LMS. And then the last step is to actually share that content. So in this case, I'm going to select this top box. As you can see, it auto selects all the content. This is the first time I'm sharing this, and I have 13 items selected. Once I select that tick box, the share button is going to show up for me. And this is where I get to make a decision based on input from the customer as to which standard I'm going to share this particular content through. Going back to the sharing content in different standards kind of best of feature list, in this particular case, with Content Controller, we have a variety of standards that you can select from. This enables our customers' content to be widely compatible with virtually every learning system in the world. If a learning system wants to only support AICC, that's perfectly fine. We can help our customers share their content through AICC, or again, any of the standards that you can see here. One of the most important things around the standard support of this application is that our customers actually get to choose what standard they publish their content to, independent of the standards that their customers' learning systems support. A lot of our customers that use Content Controller have begun leaning into the Experience API or even CMI5, which for those that don't know is the official packaging specification for XAPI tracked content. Using XAPI or CMI5 as our customers' packaging standard or content standard gives them the ability to track as much information about how their customers are utilizing their content as possible. All of that data gets saved within Content Controller's Learning Record Store. However, our customers are probably using learning systems that haven't yet adopted XAPI or CMI5, so they may still need to share the content that they have in Content Controller with a third-party system that might only support SCORM 1.2. And that's perfectly fine. When the content gets launched from that third-party system, it'll be launched through a SCORM 1.2 package, but technically it's going to be played on Content Controller, let's say as a CMI5 package. Content Controller gets to collect all of that rich XAPI data in Content Controller's LRS. And then Content Controller will translate some XAPI statements that talk about completion and pass fails and scores and total time, the things that SCORM typically cares about. And we will push that data directly back into the third-party system on your behalf. So on Content Controller, in this scenario, you have XAPI data being stored in Content Controller's LRS and available through Content Controller reports. But on your customer side, we're sharing SCORM 1.2 data because that's what their system understands and the type of data that their system is able to report on. The way that you end up sharing the content from Content Controller into the third-party system is through what we call typically proxy packages. You might also hear us refer to these as dispatch packages. I selected SCORM 1.2 from the drop-down menu, and when I download this package from that menu, what you'll find is a .zip file here that, when opened, actually contains all of the individual SCORM 1.2 proxy packages that I'm going to share with my customer's third-party LMS. You can see all of these are incredibly small. They're about 10 kilobytes in size. And that's because the actual content for each of these pieces of content or courses isn't actually contained within these files. These are simple redirect files. They all conform to the standard that you select from the drop-down menu, so they're easily imported into the third-party system. And when launched by a learner, the proxy package will actually direct the learner back to Content Controller, where we will launch the content for the user, collect all of the data that that course can generate, and then pass some of that data back into the learning management system, typically completions, pass fails, score, and total time. What we can share back into the third-party system is actually going to be dependent upon the standard that you select from this drop-down menu. So for SCORM 2004 third and fourth edition, we're able to share back interaction data if the course is generating that type of information. For LTI, we're really only sharing back a score in most cases. Again, important thing here to understand is your content can conform to one standard while sharing it with an entirely different standard. Okay, so now we've got our content shared out into the world. We've got learners beginning to interact with that content. This is where our customers tend to be curious about how their customers are using their content, and perhaps also wanting to monitor things like licensing limits, how close they are to reaching particular limits based on how you've licensed content to particular accounts. Again, going back to the best of list, reporting is number 5. And this is where you're going to be able to get access to all of this great information. So starting on the reports page, we're going to default to the usage tab here. The usage tab is going to give us some insights into a few different things. This is the one place that you can come to within the application to see all of your licenses all in one place without having to click on each individual account. So you can keep tabs on how close accounts are to reaching any particular limits that you've set for them. Depending on the type of license that you've set up, limit by account, limit by content, you're going to have visibility into those types of things. Further down the page is going to be high-level information about general usage of your content. We're not quite getting into completion percentages and things like that. We will in just a bit. This is going to be a place where you can go to get that kind of 30,000-foot view of how your content is being utilized. And you can look at it over time. I'm going to say all time in this particular case. I just want to see my content usage. I don't care about the particular accounts necessarily that are accessing it. I just want to see maybe what's my most popular course, which course has the most learners, which course is associated with the most accounts. From there, I might be curious about an individual piece of content, and I also might want to see that activity related to that course across accounts and over a certain period of time. So by selecting by account for content usage, I can actually just see a list of accounts, how many learners, how many registrations and in-progress learners each of my accounts have for this specific course, in this case, our golf course. I might also be interested in doing sort of the flip side of that, where I select an account and I want to see all of the content that I've shared with that account, again, over a particular period of time. I can see all the content that I've shared with them, how many learners. If I have an equivalent and I'm interested in seeing which language is the most popular, I can make that selection, open up the equivalent bundle and see those individual languages that are available. And maybe German is my most popular language from what I can identify here. Further down the page are going to be exports. So we have lots of customers that like to get data out of Content Controller. This is a super simple CSV export option. There's also an API side of things that we'll talk about a little bit later. Moving from left to right as we get into the course tab. The course tab is going to contain a single summary report for every piece of content that we're supporting via Content Controller. So any piece of content that you have hosted in the content tab, you've begun sharing that content out to third-party systems, customers, whoever it might be. We're going to be collecting all of the data that that content has generated across all accounts, across all learners, and bringing that into one comprehensive summary report. So if I come back into my All About Golf course, This is the summary report for that course. So not specific accounts, but in fact, all accounts and all learners. I can see generally the efficacy of this particular piece of content, completion percentages, pass-fail rates, average scores across my learner population, if there's a quiz or an assessment inside the course, score distribution, and then information about time. What was the fastest someone got through it, the longest, and kind of the typical average. If the course has a quiz or an assessment inside of it, and the course is generating what SCORM and other standards refer to as interaction data, then Content Controller will collect that information and populate the questions tab. So here we can see every question that was made available on the course and which version of the course that question is associated with. So you can see the longer list here, versions 1 and 2. And then if I select any one of these particular questions, I'm going to see the individual results or the answers that learners provided, broadly speaking, across all of my accounts. And this gives us visibility into which questions might be easy, which questions might be difficult, which questions might be a good predictor of success on the quiz or the assessment. Perhaps this brings some insights into your team where you have a question that's being missed by 80% of the learner population. That might be a question you come back to and assess and say, is the wording wrong, or is there some better way to convey this? Should we go back and teach it differently in the course itself? The last tab, from a reporting perspective under the reports tab, it's going to be the learner report. The learner report is where you would go if you're interested in diving in or digging into a specific account, and then looking at particular courses or pieces of content that you've shared with that account. So these are all of the courses that I've shared with Acme Inc. I can select one or more of these. For simplicity's sake, I'll just select our golf course. And here is where we're just looking at Acme Inc.'s results. So just their completions and pass fails, time versus score metrics. We have some average scores and average time. And then down here at the bottom of the page is where this particular report gets its name from, which is the learner table. So these are all of the individual learners at Acme Inc. that have launched the course at least once. We won't know about them until they launch it for the first time, but once they do, we will be tracking their completions and their pass fails, their score, their time, really anything that the course is capable of generating. There's a default view to this table, but if you're interested in seeing some other metrics added, you can make a selection to add different things like launch dates and completion dates. You could even add individual questions from the quiz or the assessment to this table. And now if I scroll over, I'm going to start seeing some additional information. If I have a particular way that I want all of my learner tables to render when I go to this type of report, I can save this as a template and easily load it into other reports later. When we come back to the first 4 columns, again, this is going to be the course that we're looking at, but then the learner ID and first and last name. These 3 columns are the information that the third-party system is sharing with us about that individual learner. Content Controller will receive the learner ID, the first and last name, automatically from the third-party system. If you're a type of organization that provides continuing education courses or accreditations, things like that, you may need to know who your learners are so that you can award credit hours or a certification or something of that nature. And so by default, you will have that kind of learner information within Content Controller via the learner reports. If you're the type of organization that is shy or nervous about hosting and having access to personally identifiable information for your customers' users, we've got you covered there as well. In the account, so on an account by account basis, there's a box that you can tick that will tell Content Controller to anonymize these 3 bits of information that we're going to receive from the LMS each time one of these proxy packages is launched. So if you have that configuration set for any given account, we're going to essentially hash that data before we save it in our database so that neither Rustasy software nor you as a customer will have the ability to uniquely identify users within the system. So they would have still unique identifiers. So we can keep track of learner limits and things like that related to licenses, but they will be technically globally unique identifiers where there's a string of letters and numbers not identifiable to anyone, and we can't retroactively go and reverse that either. It's just anonymized, personally identifiable information. Okay, so uh, beyond reports and what you can do within the application, it's worth noting because we'll talk about some new features coming that have just been released in our 4.0 version, which just happened a week or so ago. There is an API side to this application as well. We call it our automation API. So for customers that are interested in doing things with Content Controller in more of a systematic or programmatic way, we can provide access to that API. Virtually anything that you've seen me do in the user interface of Content Controller can also be done through the automation API. And that includes getting access to the data that we're collecting on our side. So if you want to pull data out in a more programmatic way, you have the API available to you to do just that. Okay, so before we jump back and look at some new things that have come out in 4.0, my team behind the scenes have been nice enough to start bringing in some of the questions that you all have been kind enough to submit. And so I'm going to go ahead and actually take some time now because we've got a little bit of time left on the hour to go through these and perhaps take a look at some things within the application directly based on the questions that are being asked. All right, so I've got my handy document over here. Uh, okay, so from Joy, how can we select all courses, then unselect one not needed to make it easier to select the courses instead of selecting one by one? Okay, so let me read that again. How can we select all courses, then unselect one not needed to make it easier to select the needed courses instead of selecting one by one? When sharing content, Okay, let's see. So I'm going to jump back into the account section. If you select all, actually, this might be where if I've got members of our Content Controller product team on. I think maybe Dottie and John are online. Um, Perhaps one of them would be able to come in and more directly answer this because candidly, I'm not sure how we would do that through the application. Dottie or John, are you on? And any feedback? Okay, so I'm being told by the team that this actually might be a bug in the most recent release, where if I select this and then I don't have the ability to unselect. So that is something that we will take a look at. So Joy, thank you for bringing that to our attention and asking the question. We're going to take that away and see if that's something that needs to be adjusted. Okay, so from Andreas, we'll go on to the next question. Unless John or Dottie, if you have comments to make on Joy's question. I think you're unmuted now, or can unmute.
Sorry, we were both trying to unmute. Can
Okay,
you
great.
repeat the question?
Repeat the question.
Yeah,
Yeah, so Joy was asking, I believe on this particular view, how can we select all courses, then unselect one not needed to make it easier to select the needed courses instead of selecting one by one? And right now I was showing selecting all, but then not being able to actually unselect individual courses from there.
got it.
And Joe was thinking that might be a bug, but maybe not.
It might be. We would need to go and look at what the functionality is doing right now and
Okay.
then add a ticket to change it if people don't
Yeah.
like it.
Great, cool. Well, we will, Joy, thank you again for bringing that up. We're going to go take a look at that because it seems maybe logical that you would be able to unselect individual courses once selecting all. Okay, so we're going to jump into the next one. Andreas has asked, When I publish in SCORM 1.2, can customers use a CMI5 package in their system with full access to analytics? Okay, so there's the first answer to that question is yes. So you can publish your content to SCORM 1.2. You can import those SCORM 1.2 packages into Content Controller, and we will host and help you share those. You can see if we go back into accounts and under the content tab, if we make a selection for a piece of content that we're interested in sharing, one of the selection options is going to be CMI5 so that you could share your SCORM 1.2 content with a CMI5 conformant LMS. Now, keep in mind, what we will attempt to do when sharing SCORM 1.2 packages via a CMI5 proxy package is that we are going to only be able to share XAPI data back to their learning system for the data that your course content is capable of generating. So we typically talk about the big four when we're talking about SCORM 1.2: completion, pass fail, score, and total time. We only have that level of detail from typically from a SCORM 1.2 package. So that would be the only data really that we would be able to pass back to the third party system. Even though we're sharing through CMI5 and obviously CMI5 is in the XAPI space, we're still limited to just sharing the data back that we've been able to collect from the course. We will do that in an XAPI format, but there's no way for us to get additional data that the course isn't already generating. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, so from Rachel, can we share links via a browser link instead of providing a .zip file to our customers? Absolutely. So coming back to this view, I've made my standard selection. I select get link. The options that we have here are what I did previously, which was download all of those packages. And then I might go out to Google Drive or Dropbox and share those files that way. Alternatively, I can just tick this box and that download link here will be saved to my clipboard, I guess, if that's still a term being used. And then I can pop that download link into an email or a Slack channel or whatever, however I want to share that download link with the customer. Whoever then clicks that link will get all of those individual packages, whatever associated with the download, onto their machine. Okay, so another question from Andreas. When having 5,000 plus customer organizations, is there a way to either automate sending newly added courses, or is there a portal to grant customers access to download new courses themselves? Having to manually create launch link packages and distribute them at that amount of customers seems cumbersome. Okay, so it's a great question. I'll get to the last part first. We have had customers over a number of maybe the past couple years, maybe even just this year, begin thinking about some way for their customers to have access directly to content that has been granted to them to be able to download that information. And you've mentioned a way that we have considered doing that through some sort of customer facing portal. Now, candidly, that is not something that exists today within the application. It's definitely on a product board. I know our team has talked about it over time. It's not something that I'm aware of that is currently on a development roadmap. But it is something that we hear from customers, and it's something that we would want customers to continue to talk to us about so that we can go explore what that might look like together and perhaps get that on a more official roadmap to go work on something like that. So yeah, not there today from a portal kind of manual access or automated access perspective from a customer standpoint, but something that we have been thinking about and considering as part of the roadmap. Okay, so next question: can the 30,000 foot view content usage be exported and or set as recurring to an email or to be emailed to particular recipients? Okay, so answer there. So yes, the reports can be shared by downloading the report to a CSV or copying the public URL. We'll jump back over into that and look at the account usage page, come to account. and maybe select all time so we actually have some kind of data. There's the share button, and I failed to mention this. So Jolie, thank you for asking this question. Throughout the reporting side of the application, these share buttons are going to show up and give you certain options for sharing this report or the data associated with this report. So at this particular level, we have two options. We have this first option, which is a share link. What happens here is that this generates a public URL that you could then share with any member of your team, or really anyone, in fact. And whenever that link gets clicked, the most up-to-date version of this report will be visible to that individual without them actually having to log in to the application. So that's how share links within reporting tend to work. Is that you have particular folks that maybe don't have admin rights to Content Controller, but are interested in keeping tabs on particular reports within the system. The share link is a very easy way to go about doing that. Sometimes the share button, and in this case it's true here, has a CSV export option. So if you select the CSV option, the data that is powering this particular report will get exported out to a CSV file, so that again you can take that somewhere else, maybe manipulate that data through spreadsheets or something like that. And that tends to be the case again for most of the reports within the reports section of the tool. So thank you for that question. Okay, we've got Mark asking, if data is anonymized, will the customer LMS still be able to track data by users? It's a great question and one that we get a lot, which makes me actually rethink how I talk about this, because I tend to like to answer questions as we go along. But yes, Mark, so if the data is anonymized within Content Controller, it will not impact the ability for the third-party LMS and their LMS administrators to be able to identify the users that have launched the content and how they have progressed through that content. So the anonymization is only being impacted on our side. What's happening here sort of under the hood is that when the proxy package gets launched, the standard will require that the LMS provide a learner ID, a first and last name to the content. Because the content resides within Content Controller, that learner data gets shared with our application. But if we come into the account section and select advanced and then come to the learner tab, this is where we can select this tick box, which is anonymized learner data. So as that learner data comes from the LMS, if this box is ticked for that account, we will hash the learner ID, the first and last name, before we save it in our database. But as we deliver data back into the third-party system, that LMS will know that it's Mark taking course 123. And so any data that we share back to that system will get properly associated with the proper learner and the proper course on that side. So great question. All right, my friend Ian. So what are some programmatic things that you can use the API for? For example, we use SharePoint to store or publish SCORM files. Would it be possible to set up an automation that uploads content to Content Controller directly from something like SharePoint? I don't talk a lot about the API beyond just how I sort of described it today. Maybe Dottie could jump in again here, and if I need to read the question to you again, Dottie, I'm happy to do that. It's about the API side of things. Are you back online?
Yep, I'm here and John is here as well. The question was about the API.
Yes. So what are some of the programmatic things that the API can be used for? And the example that Ian provides is we use SharePoint to store our published SCORM files. Would it be possible to set up an automation that uploads content to Content Controller directly from something like SharePoint?
We have documentation for the public API that would be helpful for them to look at for any automation. And I'm going to pass off the actual automation answer to John because I'm not entirely sure if this is something we cover currently or if it's something coming in 4.0 with webhooks.
If we're talking about importing things into Content Controller, we do have API endpoints that support course imports and version imports. So that is something that you can automate. We don't have that automation process built into Content Controller, but it is something that you can utilize the API in your own development, your own scripts to get something working.
Great. Thanks, John. Yeah, so Ian, if that's something that you're interested in, definitely reach out to the team, and we'll provide you with that documentation and any support that y'all need around getting those types of files into the system from SharePoint or otherwise. Um, Another one from Ian. So also, can you discuss some use cases for Content Controller launcher links? So yes, this is something that we have not really discussed on today's call, but I'll go ahead and highlight it briefly for folks that aren't familiar. Content Controller has a feature that is called launcher links. The idea behind Content Controller Launcher is to enable any piece of content that is hosted inside of Content Controller to actually be made accessible through a non-standards based web domain typically. So what that means is that if you have a SCORM file or a SCORM library hosted inside of Content Controller, and you want to make those SCORM files launchable through something like SharePoint, you would have the ability with Content Controller Launcher enabled to do just that. It essentially would allow for links to be generated. I can show you, I think, what that looks like here. Live demo, so we'll see what happens. Yes, so this launcher link has already been set up in my Acme Inc. account. This is the URL for this XAPI course that I could then go and paste into anything. It could be Slack. I know Dottie did a demonstration on that recently that's on our website where she showed kind of providing content access through these launcher links through Slack channels. It could be done through SharePoint. Really, anywhere that you can paste a launch URL is where Content Controller launcher links can be accessed from. There are some things to note about Content Controller launcher links that we would want to discuss with you about how to actually implement things that I'm not going to take the time to get into today. But yeah, use cases abound wherever you would want to make content accessible through. Um, Typically, it's going to be something that you would have some control over in most cases, or access to like in the case of Slack, some means to be able to identify who the users are via an application API. But again, something that we'd be happy to dive into in more detail and kind of talk through the things that you have in mind. Okay, so another question. If a customer account is currently not anonymized and you switch it to anonymized, will the learners be double counted? I don't believe so. The more important thing to understand there would be that we are not able or currently have it implemented to go back and retroactively anonymize the learner data that was not previously anonymized. So if you have um, a suspicion that you might need to anonymize data for an account, my recommendation is always to go ahead and tick that box when you're creating the account itself. So after you've created the account, you end up on the details page. You can come into the advanced tab, go ahead and tick this box upon creation of the account. And that way, from the beginning, any learner data that's shared with us will get anonymized. Now, if you do come back to this account and untick this box, from that point forward, we will no longer anonymize future learner data that's being shared with us. And I don't believe that we're doing any double counting on that, but would be useful to talk to your customer success manager to confirm that particular bit. I don't believe that is the case, but something that we should confirm together. Okay, so we're at about 10 minutes till. We've got maybe a couple more questions. Um, let's see. From Mandeep, we've got if we share a SCORM file through new demo link, will learner data collection still work the same as it would when we share as a SCO? Hmm. From a new demo. Oh, from a new demo. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. Sorry, you saw the name of the launcher link. which was called new demo link. Yes, so this is an example of a launcher link. Now that I have that in my head, let me reread the question. If you share SCORM files through a launcher link, essentially, will learner data collection still work the same as if you share it through a proxy file? This is where now we're getting into some of the details of content controller launcher links that are worth discussing with customers that are interested in using this. Um, by default, if you were just to take a launcher link and put it on a web page somewhere, um, content controller will not know who the learner is that is clicking that link from that web page. And so because the standards require that the content have a learner ID and a first and last name, because we're using SCORM in this particular case, in that case, content controller will automatically create a unique learner ID, first and last name, every time that link gets clicked from that web page. Because in this particular scenario, in this simple scenario, we don't know who the learner is because that's not being told to us. There are ways, and our support team would help you through this. There are ways for um, our customer to share learner information with us when the launch link is clicked from that web page, so that we receive and are able to collect specific learner data for the user that is actually clicking that link. So that typically tends to live in a world where there's some level of user authentication, perhaps, where the web page where the link is available knows who the user is. That user information could then be shared through the launch link. Um, Technical details of that to be explored with our support team, so that when the launcher link comes to us, ultimately hits content controller, we can collect a specific learner ID, a specific first and last name for that user. Otherwise, when that's not the case, we're just generating these kind of random unique learner IDs. So definitely something to consider and talk through with our team. Okay, so while we have just a little bit more time, I'm going to jump back over into the presentation side of things and just call out a couple of new things that are happening with our 4.0 release. There's two kind of big, interesting things that I want to call your attention to. Um, for any current customers that are on the call, talk to your customer success manager about a timeline for getting your instance up and running with 4.0, and then happy to do a deeper dive with folks on how to utilize a couple of new things that are added to Content Controller 4.0. We're really excited about this particular release. So the first one, and actually Dottie and John hinted to this earlier when we were talking about the API side of things. Webhooks have been introduced into Content Controller. Again, how this will be utilized might be very specific to your particular scenario and use case, but broadly speaking, webhooks are a way for a third party system, some other system that our customer is using, to be notified when things are happening inside of Content Controller. You can subscribe to webhooks. Obviously, you would provide us with an endpoint that we could post those messages or notifications to. And again, based on certain things that you're interested in understanding through that non-Content Controller application that's leveraging that information. So a simple example might be you want to be notified every time a particular course is being completed, for example. You can subscribe to that particular webhook, and when that particular event happens, we will post that information over to the endpoint that you provide. A way to automatically notify customers of something happening. Again, better assist customers automation and custom integration tools. We have several customers that are doing lots of things against the API, and webhooks is just the next version of being able to better assist integrations and better share information in a programmatic way with third-party systems that are relying on information happening or events happening on the content controller side of things. So definitely reach out if you've got more questions about that. The other new feature within 4.0 is lead-in pages. We've had some customers that have come to us over the years asking for the ability to put something in front of the course. So learner launches the course from the third-party LMS through the proxy package, and our customer is interested in presenting something to that learner before they actually enter into the course. So things that might be interesting here to think about with lead-in pages. If you want to get specific branding in front of the user before they enter into the course, if you have an interest or a need to collect data, keep in mind that the page that gets presented as the landing page is typically going to be some page hosted by our customer. And that's what gets sort of slid in front of the course when the learner goes to launch any particular piece of content. So data collection could be on that page. You might have a form that they need to complete before they're actually entering into the course. You might have some disclaimer that you want to present to users. It's a way to, again, kind of interrupt the learner just for a second, give them some information, request some information perhaps from them, and then when they complete the activity on that lead-in page, they enter directly into the course from there and proceed through the course as designed. So again, for current customers that are interested in exploring this, we can do a walkthrough and show you where in the application this lives and how you might set it up to achieve any particular goal that you might have around lead-in pages. For folks that are not customers on the call and this is something that piques your interest about the application, definitely reach out to us. Good likelihood you're going to be talking to me or perhaps Peter Overton on our team. We'll be happy to do a similar demonstration that I've done today, and then also be able to dive into some of the new features of 4.0, those webhook options and the lead-in pages. Okay, so I kind of went ahead and said this out loud. Here at Rusticy Software, our mantra has always been, ask us anything really. That includes questions about Content Controller that we've looked at together today, but really anything. We are particularly well suited to answer things about e-learning standards. There's a lot of times where I'll be on a call and I'll have several different hats that I'm wearing. I've got a standards hat that I can wear. I've got, general industry hat that I can wear. And then obviously I can put on my product hat when necessary to talk about particular solutions. So we encourage people to reach out to us, never be shy about it. I guarantee you're going to enjoy the conversation no matter who you're talking to here at Rusticy. We really value that time with customers and with folks that are just curious about the things that we have expertise in or interested about some of the products that we offer. So with that, I'm going to leave you there. I'm going to give you 3 minutes back in your morning or afternoon or evening. Really appreciate everyone taking some time today to allow me to walk through the application with you and some of these best of features. This is a webinar that's been recorded, and I know that we'll be sending out information about how to get access to the recording, and perhaps this is something that you'll want to share with other members of your team. Again, any questions, just come info@rusticysoftware.com or just rusticysoftware.com, and we're happy to connect and have further conversations. So appreciate everyone's time and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.